hey, thanks for joining Mike and I today to talk a little Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, let's do it.
Absolutely. So, as I was just asking you if you were at the Star today, so let's pull back the curtain maybe a little bit on your job and what you do, with the Cowboys. Maybe we start there.
Yeah, so I host a lot of their shows, and I'm one of the content creators with the Cowboys on DallasCowboys.com. I host Talking Cowboys every week and soon to be every day on the website and on iTunes podcast with myself, Heckma Harrison, Isaiah Stanback, and Rob Phillips, another DallasCowboys.com writer. I'll contribute some articles. I'll host their shows. Also cover the draft quite a bit throughout the offseason. So definitely a lot of fun back and forth. And as a guy who grew up in Texas, it really is kind of a dream come true of being able to have those moments where you're looking around and you are at the Star. I mean, that's something that I grew up looking up to, was the Cowboys organization and everybody who was a part of it. And the fact that I'm able to be in the building is something that it's cliche to say it's a dream come true, but that's exactly what it is. It really is. It's a ton of fun.
I bet. I think you and I, Mean Green.
Hey, there you go.
There we go.
That's all. That's all I need to know. You guys are my favorite podcast now. It's
right
over.
There.
It's done. The North Texas connection runs deep.
Boom. So you studied broadcast journalism? Is that right?
Converged broadcast media was what my degree was in, and then I had a double minor in journalism and marketing. So I had that double minor in there as well. So,
and I just missed you by about 20 years when I was up there. Yeah, just barely.
Just a tad.
Just barely. So I say, unfortunately, I got my degree from there in radio, television, film. Do they even still offer an RTVF degree, or is that what broadcast journalism is?
Yeah, that's what the broadcast journalism is. It's still in that RTVF building, the radio, television, film building, and whenever I first entered, that's what they called it. It was the RTVF degree, and they ultimately changed that up right as I was getting into my sophomore year, and they started calling it Converged Broadcast Media, kind of make it a little bit more new aged, I guess, is probably the reasoning behind it. But it's same building, same kind of degree though.
Mike, when I was up there, I was living in Fort Worth, and I had the 6 a.m. shift on KNTU. Now, I know it's the University of North Texas.
I had the 6 a.m. shift on KNTU.
There you go.
My senior year, and I hated it, man. And I loved KNTU. I just hated waking up early. That was the only thing, is I loved the radio station, and I loved getting on air and doing that shift, but 6 a.m.s were awful. That was the worst.
Yeah, it was brutal. So I lived in Fort Worth. I'd get up, I don't know what time, because I had to be on the air at 6. I'd drive in, turn on turn on the station, turn on the tower, do all that stuff. And the blessing of having a college radio station that only played jazz music, which I like jazz, but when you're in college, if you're not in the music program, why the hell are we playing jazz? The blessing of that is that some of those tunes were like 15, 20 minutes long. So what I would do is I would go in, I'd pick my playlist for the show, and about the first 4 or 5 songs that I would play would be no shorter than about 10 to 15 minutes apiece. I'd set the alarm on my phone and I'd go to sleep. So I'd take a nap, alarm would go off, and that was back in the day where you had the jewel cases and you had to play the CDs. So my alarm would go off with about a minute left of the song. I'd fire off play the sound of the sweeper into the next song, and then hit my alarm again and go back to sleep. I'd do that for about the first hour.
So smart. See, I was lucky. I had the automated system whenever we went in there, and we had already been using it for a while. And so I pop in at 6 o'clock. I didn't even get there at 6 o'clock. I'll say I got there for the first break. So it was usually like 6:15, 6:20. I would get in there and it would already be going, and I would sit down. I would do my first hit, which was usually a traffic hit, and it would be, there's traffic on 635 headed east, and I would say to avoid this, go there, that kind of thing. And then I would do the same thing. I would set up 2 long songs back to back, And then I would set my alarm and I'd take a little snooze and I'd sit back for 30 minutes and I would snooze in the chair, just straight back in the chair.
Yeah.
And that was my catch up, my snooze button every morning. Luckily, I didn't have to drive from Fort Worth, like you said. I wasn't driving that far. I lived just down the street from the station. So I would wake up at like 6 o'clock. I would drive down the street and I would be super lazy about it. It was awful to even say that I was trying, but I guess I got there and I didn't miss a day. So that was surprising.
Yeah. No, I had the Bermuda Triangle. So living in Fort Worth, driving up 35 to Denton, work at the station, go to school, drive down 35E to Dallas. I was working for the Wolf at that time.
Yeah.
And then I worked there till God knows what time at night, and then drive back out 183 back home, go to bed, and yeah, look where it got me. Sitting here talking to you two guys. Nice. Well, let's talk some Cowboys. So curious, training camp obviously this year is at the Star as opposed to out in beautiful California. I'd ask you how you're handling, because I'm sure you'd probably rather be out there, but how's the team handling and how's camp different this season with it being at the Star as opposed to out in California?
Yeah, I don't know if there's really that much of a difference between what we've seen here and what we would see in California, with the exception of the obvious factors of there being no fans, it being outside for the most part. Where most of the practices, even though going into training camp, Mike McCarthy said, I want to stay on the natural grass field. He's mostly had the majority of the practices inside. So they aren't on the natural grass field, whereas in Oxnard, they have two of those. And instead, you have only one at the Star, and they've kind of bypassed that to go ahead and work with the Ford Center and work indoors a little bit. Special teams, and some days they'll be outside, but for the most part, they are practicing indoors, trying to keep it nice and cool, especially whenever it is 105 degrees outside. And even in the mornings, it's still tough and still hot out there as well. So that's probably the biggest difference. The other difference that I've always noticed, at least through every single practice, is the energy that's there with the guys. And I don't know if this is just a byproduct of not having those OTAs and not having the mini camps and all of the lead in this off season into what was going to be another training camp. It's training camp every single year. I don't know if it's a byproduct of the fact that that wasn't a thing, and now you finally get to play football with your brothers again. I think there's excitement around that. And I think it's a new feel because of Mike McCarthy and because of the training, or because of the coaching staff. But I think just the fact that training camp is here and it's not delayed or it's not pushed back because of COVID-19 concerns is exciting for some of these players and these coaches to finally get back out there and play again and to lay down a hit. I know yesterday we saw Leighton Vander Esch, or 2 days ago, we saw Leighton Vander Esch lay out Tony Pollard on a hit coming across the middle. And you could just see the smile on Leighton Vander Esch's face, but there was a smile on Tony Pollard's face too, and he was the one that just got ran over by Leighton Vander Esch. So you can see the excitement in these guys, and they know the expectations that are in front of them. They know what it means to have those expectations and to star on the side of the helmet, and I think it's really exciting for all of them to finally get back to camp, and the energy absolutely shows it.
Speaking of the excitement and the energy and stuff like that, what do you with Mike McCarthy coming in, replacing Jason Garrett, how much of a factor do you think that plays into these guys just kind of having, for them maybe seemingly a fresh start, or, just how has that played into training camp so far?
I think it is a fresh start. And you talk about especially how frustrating it's been for Cowboys fans recently whenever you look at the Jason Garrett era. I mean, it was the same story every year. You have the talent, you have the players. Where's the results? Where is this going to come? And sure, there was always hype around it, and maybe the hype was overplayed, or you could really make excuses here and there. This is a guy who's been to the mountaintop. This is the guy who has lifted the Lombardi Trophy and has been to where you want to be as an NFL organization. It was one of the reasons why the Jones family was so quick to jump on top and make sure that he was their next head coach, was because he has been to the promised land. And I think that's what is respected by this roster. There's a lot of really good, talented players that the Cowboys are returning. I mean, I already mentioned Leighton Vander Esch. He can go with his buddy Jalen Smith, DeMarcus Lawrence, and then, of course, the offensive side of the football is stacked with Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and now CeeDee Lamb. They know exactly what Mike McCarthy knows. They know the knowledge and the experience and the players that he's built, like a Clay Matthews, like an Aaron Rodgers, and they want to get to that point. They want to be at that next level. And the fact that Jason Garrett hadn't been to that level, I don't think was it wasn't a knock against Jason Garrett. It was just another thing kind of in the back of the head of, are we able to get to that next level? Do we really know what it takes to do that? We know Mike McCarthy knows what it takes, and I think that's why it's refreshing to these players, and it's something they're really excited about.
Got me excited right now just talking about it.
I can be monotone and as flat as anybody out there. Mm-hmm. And to me, Jason Garrett, God love him. I think if I had to sit in a locker room and listen to him for more than one season, at some point, I'd probably be popping no-dos or something. And look, behind the scenes, maybe he was a little bit more engaging. But is McCarthy, just talk about kind of the differences in personality types between McCarthy and Garrett behind the scenes, not in front of a microphone. We can all put on a show, but behind the scenes, what do you see?
Absolutely. And I think behind the scenes, Jason Garrett was much more engaged, and he was a player's coach. And he was somebody that those players really respected and still do respect even after it's over with. You see that even already translating in New York whenever he kind of took the job up there. He's going to be well respected. He's just a great guy. He's been around this organization for a long time, or had been around this organization for a long time, and he loved it here. And you could tell that in his passion. It just didn't come out whenever he was on a microphone, like you said. When you look at the two guys, Jason Garrett, I would relate him to being a guy that you would want to go get advice from, right? You would want to go to him in times where you wanted that fatherly advice is probably the best way to put it. Is somebody you would want to go to in times of need and in times of uncertainty, and he would bring an answer and he would keep you level-headed. I think that's kind of where Jason Garrett was. He was one of those guys that was just always going to right the ship because the ship was never wrong. It's kind of the way that he looked at it. Mike McCarthy is a guy you want to go get a beer with, and you want to hang out and have conversations with, and you want to talk football and bounce new ideas and bounce all of these different aspects of the game that are new, or even the ones that have kind of stemmed from old things in the past, like his West Coast offense. You want to bounce these ideas off of him to the point where you're learning as well. And I think that's kind of the not weird, but that's the differing mindsets of the two coaches. Is Mike McCarthy's going to be more of a real down the earth type of guy, whereas Jason Garrett was more of an authority figure and somebody who always kind of knew the right answer. And as a smart guy, as smart of a guy as he was, you could absolutely see it both ways.
Yeah. So, I mean, speaking of, the Garrett and the offense and McCarthy and their offense, on the defensive side, you have Mike Nolan now, which is a big change from what we had before. Just what you've seen so far on the field, are we going to start getting more progressive, or is it going to be what is it that we've seen so far, the differences on our defensive side?
It's going to be more progressive, and it's exciting for Cowboys fans. And where as media, exactly, yeah, that's kind of the first thoughts I was having whenever I was watching practice as well. And as a media member, I'm not allowed to say schemes or depth chart or anything like that.
That's one of my questions for later.
without getting in trouble.
Well, let's find some other ways to say it. You speak Pig
exactly.
Latin?
I've loved I'll do sign language here a little bit. I took 2 years of that at North Texas. So there's fun to be had with this defense, because you look at how many good players there are. I mentioned already the linebackers, DeMarcus Lawrence. Now you add Everson Griffin to the mix on the defensive line. There's so many guys that have very talented skill sets, and Mike Nolan knows how to use his defense to match those skill sets. And that's what's exciting. Is in the past it was run as a team or a defense that was, these players have to fit our scheme. They're going to have to fit what we're trying to do in order for them to see playing time. And that hurt players from time to time. It really did. I mean, look at what Tristan Hill struggled with in his first year. He didn't fit that scheme necessarily. He was a guy that, sure, Rod Marinelli really wanted to go out and get, but he tried to fit him into a peg that he wasn't meant to be in. And now, at least through training camp, he's shined because Mike Nolan comes out and says, we're going to make sure our defense is catered to the strengths of our individuals. And that's exactly what he's doing. And I think it's going to be a change. There's going to be a lot of confusion. Great coaching. And that's exactly what I think a coach should be, is play to the strengths of your players. But there's going to be a lot of confusion, not only for offenses that are facing Mike Nolan because of the more progressive look and the changes and the different looks that they're going to end up throwing out there to opponents, but it's also going to be confusion for the fans because it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know he could do that. Or, wow, what is he doing there? This looks really weird. And fans are going to sit there and be like, what is going on? And I think there might be a learning curve for fans at the same time because there's going to be plays where the defense looks weird and then they get beat. Because everybody gets beat nowadays in the NFL defensively. It's going to happen because of how spread out and how athletic these offenses have grown to become. So there's going to be plays where you're saying, what are they doing? This makes no sense. But ultimately, the way that they're thinking is to be progressive, to allow their players to do multiple things. And I think it's going to ultimately run and be very progressive and very positive in the long run.
You know, Mike, that was a great question. I'm glad that you asked that because, you know, the idea of running simple schemes, keep it simple, let them play fast. If you're thinking too much, you're playing slow. I get that to a point. I get the idea of if you have superior talent and keep it simple and let them just line up and get after it. But in the NFL, you know, the line between superior talent and average talent, you know, I mean, it's just – the Cowboys didn't have superior talent. It's hard to have that across the board in the NFL. And it was just – I think it was just too damn easy for offenses to game plan, you know, against that. And I agree with you. Yeah, it would not surprise me if the first few games fans are raising hell. You know, busted coverages and assignments. And
they're going to raise hell no matter what.
You know, it's going to happen. But if we stick with it long term, it's got to be better than what we've had the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, and you also got to – I was going to say, you also got to think about the offseason and the lack of time to install. This is training camp, and they're still installing defenses and looks and different things for the first time. They're having to cram in all of these added times and learning sessions into training camp. And I think that learning curve is going to come from that as well. It's not only going to come from just the odd look of what the defense is going to do, but it's also going to come from just the lack of time that this team is going to have to be comfortable in that defense compared to what they've seen in the past.
Yeah, and especially with the whole, you know, the situation we're in with the COVID and everything. I mean, it's just kind of an odd time because, like you said, the training camps were different. You know, a new coaching staff, a new style. So they're trying to cram, like you said, everything in. So it's almost a slight disadvantage because, you know, they're trying to learn a whole new, I guess, scheme or coaching staff, you know, stuff like that. So they're kind of put behind the 8 ball, somewhat behind that a little bit. You know, but staying on the defensive side, recently we've heard a lot of chatter about Earl Thomas. You know, for me personally, I mean, I'm a huge Cowboys fan. I've been a season ticket holder for like 10 years now. But this is one of the better defenses that I've seen on paper that we've had in quite a long time. What is the chatter over there about possibly bringing in Earl Thomas, or is he not a fit with it's more of a locker room fit than anything right now with him?
Yeah, I think there was original chatter. I really do, especially whenever he was first released. But I think the decision, at least from what we've seen in the lack of decisions, I guess, from this Cowboys front office regarding Earl Thomas, is they wanted to do their due diligence. They wanted to make sure that they knew what they would be getting in an Earl Thomas standpoint, because there's momentum with this team right now. The practices have been solid. You've seen growth in some of your young guys like a Trayvon Diggs, who's going to play in that secondary, like an Xavier Woods, who is entering what I think could be a breakout year for the safety. I think there's hesitation from this front office to bring in a guy, even as talented as Earl Thomas. Sure, he's not in his prime. Sure, he's on the back half of his career, but he would make you a better football team, X's and O's wise. Right now, he would come in and he would be better than what you have, at least back there. And I think him and Xavier Woods would complement each other extremely well. However, I think, like you said, there's concern around the locker room. What exactly happened in Baltimore? That's one of the best run organizations in all of football, and they have been for the past 2 decades. And they were very quick to get rid of him and to pay money to get rid of him. And it was that big of a deal to where the leadership committee was against him being on the team, and it was that toxic of a situation that it scares me a little bit. I don't think it's as cut and dry as we like Earl Thomas, we want him to be a Dallas Cowboy, let's go get him, like it was in Seattle of the throwing up a first-round pick and potentially trying to bring him in on a trade or a big-time deal in free agency. I don't think it's as cut and dry as that was. I think there's a lot more behind the scenes going on with him and kind of the off-the-field issues he's been dealing with. And I think the Cowboys want to make sure that even if they are going to make a move, I'm not saying they won't make a move, but if they are going to, they want to make sure they have all of their bases covered just in case something were to pop up that they hadn't necessarily heard yet.
You know, Mike and I did a show recently where we talked about Cowboys kind of gambles and second chance players over the years. Fun show to do. If we'd have done a little bit later, then this would have been included in it. Because, I mean, we went through – what did we go through? 10 plus players, Mike,
something
at
like
least?
That. Something like that.
Yep. So I don't know if you can answer this, Kyle, because you may have to be dealing with Earl here before long. But I'm going to put Mike on the spot. Mike, you're Jerry Jones for the day. Are you signing him?
Well, the big question is is he going to be the guy that's going to put us over the top and, one, get us to the Super Bowl? Is a Super Bowl worth that headache, I guess you could say? To me, this is the best roster I've personally seen in quite a while, offensively and defensively as a combined unit. I was talking to one of my buddies the other day about look, man, I would sign him. I would make my run at the Super Bowl. If we get one Super Bowl and it costs us 2 years of going backwards, here in the next 3 or 4 years, I'll take that Super Bowl to be in last place in 2 years, because that Super Bowl, the Super Bowl's a Super Bowl, man.
you got your Jerry Jones Ouija board over there? Is he communicating through you?
Yeah, from listening to Jerry the other day on The Fan, it sounded like, in my opinion, it sounded kind of like he wants to. He's trying to find a way to make it right, to make it be like, okay, look, it's worth doing this. We all know Jerry's a gambler. He's willing to take those risks. For the greater good of the team. Now are the coaches willing to deal with that? In the locker room, that's the big question. Will he be somebody that because continuity plays such a big role in the clubhouse and the locker room. One guy can tear a locker room apart. So to me, that's the biggest question. Is he going to rip apart what they've built, what they put together? And from what Kyle's saying, it sounds like they're becoming one big family, and that's going in the right direction. To make that answer short, yes.
You would?
Yes.
Yeah. For me, I look at that defense, and if there's one area of concern, it's safety. And not to say that there aren't other areas, but that's the one area. Now, do you have to have Pro Bowl caliber safeties to win a Super Bowl? Not necessarily. But I think if you could structure a deal in a way that, he's basically getting paid
game by game.
You got it. Then get in here, get with the program, get in line, do what you need to be doing, cut all this nonsense out, and it's going to work out fine for everybody involved. If you're not going to do that, then we're going to put you back on the street. And honestly, guys like him, we talked about Terrell Owens and in our previous podcast. At some point in time, clubs start looking at him and saying, okay, does the talent outweigh all the other nonsense and the noise and the distractions that come with him? And as those scales kind of start tipping in the wrong direction, next thing you know, you're a former player. You can't get back in anymore. So we'll see.
Yeah. Got to be a low risk, high reward type contract, I think.
Yep. You mentioned Tristan Hill earlier. And I said it in the previous podcast, and I'll say it again. I'm not optimistic with him. I know it sounds like he's been doing some good things in this camp. But a zebra doesn't change its stripes. He is who he is. And I think it's more, I don't know if it's a maturity issue, if it's an attitude issue. At some point in time, adversity is going to hit. And is he going to go, is he going to revert back to how he was or the way that he was? I'm just not optimistic there. I don't know what you're seeing there, Kyle.
Yeah, no, I think he's growing into a role that I think he was trying to grow into too quickly last year, because as a second-round pick, there were expectations that he was going to come in and be either the 1 technique or the 3 technique. It didn't matter. It was wherever you fit, where are you going to play alongside Tyrone Crawford in this defense? And I think he tried to fit into that when he really wasn't ready. I don't think he was strong enough. I don't think he was quick enough. I don't think he really saw an opportunity to grow as a rookie. I think he saw the pressure of, I need to be the guy and I need to be ready to go. And I don't think he was at any point last year. It looks a little bit different. He's got a little bit more confidence. He's got that step. He's got the look of someone who knows that he's got something to prove, and he's got something out there, and you can see it in his reps. I mean, the guy doesn't take a rep off anymore, and he would take reps off previously, and he would take reps where you're getting blown up by a more unathletic, maybe a backup guard or something like the sort in practices, and you would see that from time to time with Hill last year. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think this is a guy who's kind of grown into a professional body. He's bigger. He looks stronger. He's got a couple more moves in his arsenal than he even did coming out of UCF, which is something that I think is going to benefit him well. I think he's learned previously from Gerald McCoy before McCoy got hurt, and I think he's learned from Dontari Poe, another veteran who was originally a first-round pick. I think he's starting to finally get it. I don't know if it's clicked completely yet. I won't know that until you start watching the games and he actually makes an impact in these games. But from what we've seen in practice, it's head and shoulders above where he was in 2019. And that's encouraging to me, at least, because I'm like you. I was pretty unoptimistic. I was pessimistic about the whole situation with Hill, and I was worried that it was going to be a waste of a pick, but he's starting to show that, hey, he's got some left in the tank. Don't give up on him just yet, and I think that's a positive thing.
Good. You brought up Tyrone Crawford, and to me, I think Tyrone Crawford in the past years has kind of been the anchor of that defense. Not so much from an output standpoint, but just the presence of him being there. How has he looked so far coming off the surgeries and stuff like that?
You wouldn't think that he had just come off a surgery like he did, where he's got basically 2 bad hips, and you wouldn't be able to tell. He's fully recovered. He looks crisp. He looks good. And I think he's going to have a pretty decent year, kind of doing the same kind of role he's had in the past. He's not going to blow anybody up. He's not going to have the sexy stat numbers. He's not going to have anything that's going to really stand out from the crowd. He's not going to be a Pro Bowler or anything of the sort. He is a glue guy, like you said. He's going to bring that challenge. He's going to bring the fire, the energy to practices. You see that already. I think he's made an impact on Tristan Hill and some of those other young guys like a Neville Gallimore in the middle of that defensive line. I think he's made an impact with Antoine Woods. I think one of the big reasons that Antoine Woods is still around the Dallas Cowboys right now is because Tyrone Crawford got his hands on him and kind of was able to instill a work ethic and be that on-field leader that the defensive line needs. And I think he's going to continue to play that role. I think he's going to have a solid season just based off of how he looks. He looks athletic. He looks healthy, and there's really no lag behind on that hip. And I think paired with Dontari Poe, a bigger, beefier defensive tackle and nose tackle, it's going to open Tyrone Crawford up at that three technique spot to really finally have a little bit of help on let's just say help in general on that defensive line, because I think Poe's going to allow that to happen, and I think Crawford has a good year.
So on the defensive side of the ball, Aldon Smith, heard good things coming out of camp about him and about the fact that evidently he's really not missing a beat. What have you seen, and what are you hearing around the star about him?
Yeah, it's tough to actually really get a gauge on how good he's been, because he is going up against third and fourth string offensive tackles, at least right now. But if you go back to the first couple days of camp, and I did this yesterday, I was like, how good is Aldon Smith actually? And I went back and I looked at some of the notes that I've got, and I was like, man, I was impressed with Aldon Smith when he was going up against Tyron Smith on the other side. I think both of the Smiths, who, by the way, have faced each other quite a bit before, Aldon Smith got the best of Tyrone Smith on 60% of the snaps through the first couple practices before Smith had to take a little bit of time off via the injury. So I think he has an opportunity behind Everson Griffin with little to no pressure on him to come in and produce. And that's all you're asking. You were talking about a team-friendly contract with Earl Thomas a little bit earlier. It's a team-friendly contract with Aldon Smith. If he's going to reach the full incentives of his contract, that means he plays 16 games and he has 14 sacks. And I think if he has those numbers, you're going to be pretty darn happy with Aldon Smith. And he's not just going to be a Pro Bowler, but an All-Pro if he's able to reach that. I don't think he will. I don't think that's the goal for Aldon Smith. If he comes in and gets you 4 or 5 sacks this year, all of a sudden you've got one of the best defensive lines in all of football, because you have a guy like Aldon Smith who can come in off the bench and rotate in and out, even play inside a little bit and bring you some pass rush. You've got Everson Griffin there and DeMarcus Lawrence. I don't name another defensive line that across the board has pass rushers like that, and then you pair it with Dontari Poe, Tyrone Crawford, maybe an improved Tristan Hill. All of a sudden you're cooking with gas on that defensive line after that was a spot of worry heading into the offseason.
Yeah. Let's maybe flip to the other side of the ball, offensive line. So talk about Tyrone Smith. Love the guy. You know, every year there's something from an injury standpoint there, which is amazing because he's built like a Greek god, you know. I mean, he just looks like he ought to be just bulletproof, but it happens. I think I saw today Mitch Hyatt went down with a knee injury. Offensive line is an area of concern for me. In fact, on the offensive side of the ball, I don't think there's any question. That's a huge question mark. You lose Travis Frederick. Love Big Joe Looney. But if you look back to when he filled in for Travis a couple of seasons ago, I think there was definitely a drop-off. What are you seeing? What are they talking about with regards to the O-line?
Well, if you're comparing somebody to Joe Looney, or not Joe Looney, but to Travis Frederick, there's going to be a drop-off no matter where you end up
Absolutely.
going. It's the same thing as whenever Zach Martin finally calls it quits, and hopefully that's not for another 2 decades because of how good he's been. There's going to be a little bit of a drop-off, and I think Joe Looney has embraced the starting center role a little bit, whereas he was the fill-in. He was the stopgap back in 2018, and he ended up getting 1,000 reps, 1,000 snaps as a starting center. I think he's come in and he's filled that role nicely. He even addressed the team after practice today in light of the social injustice and some of the things going on outside of football right now. He was the one that actually addressed the team. So I think he's got a little bit of a leadership role. He knows that Tyler Biadasz is behind him as a potential replacement long-term at the center position, but I don't think he's worried about that just yet. I think he's worried about improving, and I think he's looked like a veteran going up against this defensive line in practice, as opposed to even some of those other guys who were considered backups, who have been seeing a lot of playing time. Sure, you gotta have a little bit of worry when it comes to Smith. I mean, whenever you get up in your 30s, you're not going to be the same left tackle that dominated football throughout the majority of your career. Even Lyle Collins, who missed a game last year, who sat out the first couple weeks of training camp, he's back and at least was suited up today. So you're starting to see positive improvement health-wise from the offensive line, but it is an area of worry. You've got Zach Martin, who's fantastic. I think Joe Looney's going to be an admirable fill-in at the center spot. Connor Williams still a big question mark at left guard. Whenever you have so many skills positions and so many guys that you know are going to be really good, like Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup and Dak and Zeke, all of those guys need blockers to get the football to them. And so I'm right there with you. If there was one spot to be concerned about, it would be the offensive line, but I still don't necessarily think they're going to have a bad year offensively because of the offensive line. I think it's just maybe not what we've been used to seeing, which is one of the best offensive lines in football.
Yeah, I think if they can stay relatively healthy, I think they'll be all right. You know, there's been a lot of discussion around, you know, is Zeke going to get fed the ball enough? Are they going to run the ball enough? And again, I'm not completely bagging on the O-line, but I think he's going to have to pound the rock a lot this season. You know, he
Sounds
even
like
with
you're bagging
CD
on the O-line.
Well, I'm not saying, I'm just saying. But, yeah, I really do. I expect that he's probably going to run quite a bit. I'd love to see he and Pollard in the backfield together, mixing some of that stuff up. I mean, they got so many weapons. You touched on CD and on Cooper and on Gallup. Jarwin, different conversation. Not saying he's a bad guy, but those skill positions, man, they're deep. They just got to have the time to be able to do something with the ball. So, yeah.
And I think they will. I think whenever you look at how creative Kellen Moore was, even last year whenever Tyron Smith was out, and you saw Travis Frederick kind of getting back into the groove after taking 2018 off, I think Kellen Moore saw an opportunity to be creative behind the line of scrimmage and use a little bit of that two-back set with Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard, or find a way to get Blake Jarwin involved in the passing game, and even using a slot receiver in Randall Cobb, which, by the way, you have a highly improved version of Randall Cobb. If you even, I don't know, that's not even a comparison between him and CeeDee Lamb, but you have a slot receiver that's going to be as talented as CeeDee Lamb. Get him involved as well. So there's a lot of different options that you can still get the ball into their hands. It's just not going to be as cut and dry as let's give the ball to Zeke, let him churn up 8 yards, and then we'll have some fun on second and short moving forward. And I think that's something that they're going to have to really work on as a coaching staff to get better at from an offensive line standpoint and get healthy heading into the year.
With all three receivers, do you think there's do you think we potentially have 3 number 1 wide receivers?
Oh, I know we do. And it's honestly, it's crazy because people ask me,
ever.
What was that?
So it's got to be one of the best wide receiver groups that could possibly ever.
Maybe ever. And that's a lot, because there's been a lot of really good wide receiving cores. But whenever you're watching CeeDee Lamb run, Cowboys fans are going to have a fit. It's insane how good he is and how he makes those around him look slow. People have asked me, they're saying, who's the best in camp so far? If I had to say out of the top 3 receivers, it would be CeeDee Lamb number 1, Michael Gallup number 2, Amari Cooper number 3. And that's not anything against Michael Gallup or Amari Cooper. That's just how good CeeDee Lamb has been, is because he's one of the best receivers that I've seen in person ever. At the college level, I watched him play multiple times at the college level. Seeing him in practice, it looks almost the same, the way he's able to make defenders miss. The body control, it's all there. And if Amari Cooper's your 3rd best receiver, you've got a fantastic problem. Fantastic problem. Because there's so many different things you can do. Dak Prescott's got to be licking his chops, maybe even more so for Kellen Moore. Mike McCarthy's just on cloud 9. The NFL is going to be ruining the day that he fell to 17 for a long, long time because it's a cheat code is what he is.
It's almost like a Randy Moss type situation.
I don't want to compare him to Randy Moss right now as a rookie, but he's got a chance to be something special. He really does.
So with all the weapons, with the three receivers, with Zeke, I personally think Blake Jarwin is going to really do well, especially with just all the coverages of trying to stop everybody else. How do you see this playing out with trying to get the ball to all these guys?
I think it's going to take some time to maybe fall into a rhythm of who is going to be the impact player and who's going to be covered by these defenses and how are they going to plan to stop them. But I think you do have a chance to make everybody happy. You don't have to have 3,000-yard receivers. And even if you did, you can still have a 1,000-yard running back. We've seen that before in the past when it was either the Colts or the Cardinals, one of those two teams that had 3,000-yard receivers in a single season. One of those two teams had a 1,200-yard running back. And so there's a chance to be able to spread around the ball and be successful even with just so many weapons to get to that point. And I think Blake Jarwin, I think he's a great receiving tight end. He might be the odd man out just because of how good the rest of this offense is, and that's not a bad thing either. He's just got to find a way to contribute in other ways. I think he's going to have to find a way to be a better blocker than he has been in the past. He will have to convert in red zone situations and short yardage situations, but he's still somebody who I think could do that at a high level. You just might not be able to see it as much because of the impact that a lot of these other skills guys are going to have. So even though you're going to spread it around and you're going to share the rock and you're going to have a lot of different guys touching the football every single drive, they've also got other roles they're going to have to fill very nicely in order to be successful for the other ones around there. Blocking downfield if you're a wide receiver, well, pass protection if you're a running back. They have to excel in those little areas and those little detailed areas if they're all going to get their fill.
Yeah.
So we touched on CD Lamb, Diggs. You mentioned him earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe who's another rookie or two that's having a solid camp that maybe has an opportunity to come in and contribute?
Yeah, so I think if you wanted to go kind of an under-the-radar guy, it would be Francis Bernard, the Utah linebacker, who was one of the best coverage linebackers in all of college football last year. He's come in and shown exactly why he was one of the best coverage linebackers in all of football. He's had a pair of picks, is usually in the right spot at the right time. There are a couple plays where he looks like a rookie and he makes a poor read, but that's going to happen. But I think he's kind of taken a leap into the conversation of being in the backup tight end group and right in there with a Luke Gifford and a Joe Thomas. He's in that conversation. Another guy I've really been impressed with is Bradley Anai, a fifth-round pick out of Utah as well. I guess I'll just go with the Utah Utes teammates. But Bradley, who isn't the most athletic pass rusher. He's not a guy who's going to jump off the page and really stand out to you as, hey, this guy's going to have 10 sacks. He's not that, but he gave you that in college. You took a chance on him in the fifth round when a lot of people had a third-round grade on him, and he's showing out at the moment. I mean, he's providing pressure. He had 2 sacks, or what would have been 2 sacks today of Dak Prescott against Cam Irving. And Cam Irving was brought in to be your backup swing tackle. And that's not – you're not going up against Mitch Hyatt and Adam Redmond at that point. You're going up against a guy who started for a Super Bowl champion last year, and that's Cam Irving. And I think the fact that he's now getting some reps against some of those better offensive tackles and he's still showing that he's going to find a way to get to the football and get home quickly, that's super encouraging for somebody who, like I said, was not necessarily impressive during the draft process, but he was impressive production-wise in college. He was impressive on tape, and you're starting to see why.
Does Ben DiNucci force his way onto the roster as the third quarterback?
The Nooch. That's what he needs to be affectionately called for the rest of time because
Agreed.
I love that. And I think he has a legitimate shot to be that third quarterback. And in a year like this where it's still the 53-man roster, but you have some practice squad flexibility, and it could happen so quickly where you're down a quarterback because of the COVID-19 situation and lots of different things going on. I wouldn't be surprised if they kept three quarterbacks. And if he is that third quarterback, I think he's distanced himself a little bit from Clayton Thorson. Thorson might have a better arm, but I think DiNucci makes up with the lack of arm power, which I still think he has a strong arm, just not as strong. But I think he makes up with that by being able to do multiple things, run around, extend the play, throw on the run, do kind of have a crazy way of getting out of trouble. He had one play today where he kind of scrambled around the left tackle and was able to gain legitimate yardage. So I think he's in that conversation. It's just whether or not they're going to keep the three quarterbacks. I think they will. And Mike McCarthy has done that in the past. He did it in Green Bay where he kept three quarterbacks on a roster. And I think in a year like this, it's crucial to have as many of those important positions kind of backed up, ready and stocked up just in case something happens. And he's one of those guys I just don't think the Cowboys want to let get away if they were to stick him on a practice squad.
I can't remember the guy's name, but he reminds me of a guy that used to play quarterback for the Cowboys just a few years ago.
Oh, yeah? Did that guy wear number 9?
You know what? He may have. Yeah, he may have.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We don't want to saddle him with those sorts of expectations just yet. But, yeah, from what I'm reading and hearing, some similarities maybe. So, yeah. Be interesting.
Yeah, so I don't think that's necessarily a crazy comparison between the two. I mean, they're both small school guys who are way under the radar and have a strong arm but can do a bunch of different things. And I think that's where he kind of fits into that role. It would be a super stretch for it to really be a legitimate comparison. But the fact that they're at least in that conversation for the same sort of factors, it's fun to look at.
Well, I want the audio of Jerry in about 2 or 3 seasons, maybe an Albernays, saying the Nooch is a miracle. It was a miracle. The Nooch was a miracle.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
So far, who has been your biggest surprise? Whether it's a rookie, a veteran, whether it's a positive or a negative, what has been the biggest surprise in your eyes so far through camp?
On the defensive side of the football, it would be Tristan Hill, kind of how we were talking about earlier, how I was pretty down on him really kind of resurrecting his career, but he's done a fantastic job, I think, of really kind of proving himself through camp so far. I would go with Dalton Schultz on the other side of the football, though. He's been a guy who I didn't want to see run downfield a whole lot. I wanted him to stick to the blocking side and maybe a little out route here and there to keep teams honest. He's shown he can be a vertical passing threat, and he's done it against the first-team defense, too. He's done it against Jalen Smith, Leighton Vander Esch, Daryl Worley, all these different guys that he's made plays over. And I think that's something that I didn't expect to happen originally. But the fact that it is happening, it makes me extremely happy because, like I said with Blake Jarwin earlier, you have to do a bunch of little things right. And if Dalton Schultz ends up being the guy that does the little things right, then all of a sudden you've got another added factor to this offense that you didn't necessarily think was going to make an impact going into 2020. And maybe that's a testament to the coaching staff. Maybe it's just Dalton Schultz finally having something click as he goes into year 3. But it's been a long time overdue for him to finally find a rhythm. But it looks like he's starting to find it.
Just add him to the weapons.
There we go. Kyle, where can people find you? How do they find you? Social media, Twitter, whatever the case may be. Lay it on us.
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter, very active on there, at Kyle_Youmans. It's YOUMANS. You can find me every week on Talking Cowboys and on Training Camp Live. At the moment, you'll see me throughout the season on the website on DallasCowboys.com hosting shows and pre-game and post-game shows. I'll be up at the stadium this Sunday for the blue and white scrimmage. We'll be up on the concourse there, staying socially distant, but bringing you a whole slew of Cowboys coverage. It's going to be a ton of fun Sunday, but man, this season's coming up quickly, and I'm excited about it.
Outstanding. So make sure and hit up Kyle on Twitter. Check out his fine work on DallasCowboys.com. Little plug for Off the Plate. So Off the Plate Pod on Twitter and on Instagram as well. And of course, you can find this podcast, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your favorite podcast programming from. Dial it up. So Kyle, appreciate you joining us today, man. In the car. I hope you had that car running, by the way, because we are in Texas.
Oh,
it's hotter than sin outside. So
yeah, no, I had it running. Don't worry. I'm full AC right now. I'm just hoping it didn't pick up in the microphone the whole time. Just it
No,
is
you're
Texas,
good.
and it is
better
hot
that than you
here,
passing
so.
out from a heat stroke in the middle of the show here.
That's true. That's true. Hey, it's up here close to Denton, so things got to get hot in Denton, baby. Go Mean Green.
You got it. You got it. All
Kyle,
right.
thank you, man. We'll be looking forward to watching you the rest of this season, man.
Sounds good, guys. I appreciate y'all having me.
Thanks, buddy.
Yes, sir.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you.
Thanks.